Hello, I am Ashley Brooks with the American Public University. Today I am presenting Ethical Influences on U.S. Climate Change Laws and Regulations to EVSP508 Environmental Ethics Winter Session B001 2020. The topic today is that of climate change and laws or regulations in the U.S. that deal with this topic. We will take a look at the underlying worldviews on environmental ethics that can be associated with the law or regulation. Specific laws concerning climate change in the U.S. are basically non-existent. The U.S. has been part of larger initiatives with other countries to address climate change. However, in those instances, they have left the agreements to do their own thing. The laws and regulations covered in this discussion were not meant to be directly addressing climate change. However, the scientific community has been able to link a lot of their air quality issues to climate change. Finding the underlying worldviews on environmental ethics related to laws is somewhat difficult without combing over pages upon pages of documents related to the discussion, making process of those laws being improved. Even then, in most cases, the ethical reasoning of why someone has voted to approve such a law is not a requirement. Ethics is a subjective topic, and in the U.S., people demand facts and would prefer lawmakers do not make decisions on personal feelings. Despite that, there are themes present when looking at summaries and specifics of each law. Looking at the intended outcome and what is being controlled helps to give some insight as to what the priority is. We will look at the Clean Air Act, Energy Independence and Security Act, National Environmental Policy Act, and energy policy. Climate change policy is a constant and ever-evolving topic of lawmakers and environmentalists. The Clean Air Act was established in 1970 and its associated agency is the Environmental Protection Agency. Throughout this act, there are influences of anthropocentric worldview. It was the first of its kind and is considered to have started the modern environmental movement. It does not directly mention climate change. However, many of the policies that it contains have a direct impact on toxins released into the air that exacerbate conditions for climate change. It does mention controlling pollution specific to the ozone layer that is a large part in controlling weather fluctuations that are common with climate change. The environment is a point of concern with the act, but human health and survival is at the forefront of the priority list. Environmental aspects such as crops and coral reefs are secondary beneficiaries to controlled air toxins. Preservation of these are still to the benefit of human enjoyment and survival. In this case, instrumental value is placed on air quality due to the fact that humans cannot survive with polluted air, nor can anything else that is living that humans depend on for survival. The National Environmental Policy Act was also established in 1970. The associated agencies are the Council of Environmental Quality, U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. Department of Interior, and the Environmental Protection Agency. Other agencies can be affected by this law depending on what kind of work they intend to do. Anthropocentric influences are seen throughout this act, but some stewardship worldview themes can be detected as well. The declaration of the policy calls for the government to use all feasible means to establish conditions where man and nature can coexist peacefully. It identifies that generations must sustain the environment for future generations and use the environment to meet our needs, but without degrading it or causing any undesirable or unintended consequences. Through well-planned actions and taking the environment into consideration, NEPA hopes to achieve balances between populations and resources that in turn will promote a high standard of living and equal sharing of life's amenities. Again, the law protects against harmful activities that can create situations ideal for climate change. The National Air and Quality Standard was established to protect the public from short-term fine particle exposure in the air, and hopefully, by controlling it in the short term, we can prevent the long-term effects associated with climate change. The Energy Policy Act was passed in 2005, and its associated agencies are the Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and the U.S. Department of Transportation. Within this act, there are clear influences of stewardship worldviews. This act is responsible for initiatives that address energy production that directly affect harmful emissions contributing to climate change. There is little mention of the direct impact these changes will have for human survival or enjoyment, but there is a clear concern that if human energy emission activities do not improve, there will be consequences. Implementing a committee of climate change technology is a priority of this act, and its goal is to continuously submit reports on progress of climate change technology that will help industries reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. These projects must reduce levels to a level lower than when the act was brought into effect and produce large-scale reduction of greenhouse gas intensity. Like any government policy, there is always mention of some sort of gain for industry, and it does have clear indications that if the government will invest in such programs or technologies, that they must be maximizing their return. Though it may be a small mention, the climate change initiatives within this act seem to be the most extensive in terms of mentioning and plans to address it. Finally, the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007 is mainly associated with the Environmental Protection Agency. Anthropocentric and ecocentric worldviews can be seen within this act. This act involves actions that can reduce the progression of climate change by working to move the government towards cleaner and renewable fuels and promote research on more efficient ways to capture greenhouse gases. A lot of concern is shown for the consumer and fuel economy that are large parts of the U.S. infrastructure. Anthropocentric in nature, we are not going to make a significant changes to pollution control if we could weaken the economy and hurt the industries that run America. It does, however, show egocentric themes in that an understanding that something must be done because humans are in fact reliant on air quality, and we are part of this world like other living things reliant on clean air. By placing priority on more environmentally friendly energy systems, the government is placing priority on preserving other parts of the environment rather than just those parts that humans directly depend on. In conclusion, the U.S. government's approach to climate environment ethics is to keep their laws and policy free from direct emotion and bias. Emotions can run high by political parties when climate change is the topic, and currently any endeavors parties make to establish a policy solely for mitigating climate change never makes it very far and is not approved. Clearly, the role of the government will be to protect the people, or at least that is the stance they need to take. Most laws gain approval because they are written in some way to promote something that will help mankind. Environmental policy has changed over time from staunch anthropocentric views where humans are the center of all things and anything done to protect the environment is a direct gain for mankind. As the priorities of the populations began to expand, the concern for the environment grew. Laws also began to change to include stewardship type initiatives that promote benefits for humans by protecting the environment.